Welcome back to my channel. So in my last lecture, I discussed about the animal kingdom. That we discussed about the classification of the animal kingdom. That is, we have divided into Porifera, Colinterata, Latihelminthes, Nematoda, Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, Hemichordata, and Chordata. And further, we discuss in detail about all the classifications. For example, Porifera, Colinterata, we have discussed all this. So you can go through the previous lecture. So today we'll be discussing about an important subphylum of Chordata, that is vertebrae. So animals having a vertebral column, that is backbone, we call it as vertebrae. For example, the Pisces, they have a gills for respiration, fins for locomotion, cold-blooded, and scales are present. Next is Amphibia. They live on land and water, and they have a moist skin. For example, frog and salamander. Next is Reptilia. So they have a dry scale skin, lungs for respiration, and they are also cold-blooded. For example, lizard, snake, turtle. And next is the Aves birds. For example, the feather present wings for flying, warm-blooded, beak, no teeth. And in Mammalia, they have a hair on body, mammary glands present, and they are warm-blooded. For example, we human beings, the dog and cow. And this is again the classification of the animal kingdom at a glance. So just for a quick revision, so you can look into this. Let's do a quick revision. So for example, Porifera was the pores and canal system. Cnidaria was that they are diploblastic, radial symmetry, and neurocytes. Okay, and Annelida was that segmented body. Remember, I talked about the earthworm. They are they have a segmented body. And next is Arthropoda, chitinous exoskeleton, jointed appendages, and chordata. They have a notochord, dorsal nerve cord, gill, slit, post, anal tail. Okay, so these are covered in the previous class. So just these are just a quick revision. Okay, for example, for exam tip, most questions in exams are coming from definition, key feature, example, differences, and classification. So and it can be confusing that which phylum we are reading and what are the classification of the animal kingdom. So if you go through it again and again, I think it will be very, very easy for you to understand. Next is body cavity. So body cavity is a space between the body wall and the gut wall. Okay, so just a diagrammatic representation of it. So here is the gut wall, and here you see that body wall. So that space between the body wall and the gut wall is known as column. So column is nothing but a true body cavity completely lined by the mesoderm. And pseudocolumn is what? That body cavity not completely lined by the mesoderm. And eclumate is that no body cavity between the body wall and the gut wall. So it is a fluid filled in some animals and is lined by the mesoderm in collimates. So and next is it provides space for the growth, development, and internal movement of the organs. Now let's discuss about various types of body cavity. So you can see that there are three types of body cavity, that is eclumate, pseudocollimate, and collimate. Collimate, that is true column. So so in eclumate, what is happening is that there is no body cavity between body wall and gut. Okay, the space is filled with mesodermal tissue, parenchyma. Simplest body plan. They have a simplest body plan. And if I talk about the pseudocollimate, they have a body cavity present but not completely lined by the mesoderm. So cavity is derived from blastocoel, and the mesoderm forms patches on the outer side only. And if I talk about the third type of body cavity, that is body cavity collimate, or body cavity is completely lined by the mesoderm. The cavity is formed by splitting of mesoderm, allows better development of the organ. So for example, the BPSC says that, I mean in the prelims, they just say that a collimate allows better development of organ, or pseudocollimate allows better development of organ. Okay, so because the names are very familiar, so you might get confused, and for that reason it's very important that I have tried to provide the simplistic notes in very simple lecture, so that whatever the definitions are there, they are very much clear to you. Okay, so for example, the example of the colmate would be Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata, and Chordata. Okay, now these are the diagrams also. So here you see in pseudocolmate, so there is a pseudocolum which is filled with fluid. Okay, and always remember endoderm is a gut lining, and here is the ectoderm. Okay, so there are some other key points. For example, colon provides space for organ development and movement. Now one can ask, what is the why the colon is required? So because it is required for the organ development and also for the movement. It acts as a hydrostatic skeleton in many animals. Columnic fluid helps in nutrient transport and waste removal. Again, a very important point, that why there is fluid. Colmic fluid is there because it helps in the nutrient transportation of the nutrient and waste removal also. And collumates are more evolved than accolummates and pseudocollumates. Now see, these are the direct questions for the BPSC, because for example here BPSC mentioned that pseudocolumate are more evolved than accolummates and columate. Okay, so it might confuse you. Okay, now here is a comparison table which is there. For example, in accolumate the body cavity is absent, and pseudocolumate is present but not completely lined by the mesoderm. But in columate, what happens, that is we call it as true column. So here the present and completely lined by the mesoderm. And what about the mesoderm? Fills the space present at the patches. Okay, and they forms a complete lining. Now if I talk about the origin, so mesoderm fills the space, okay, from blaster coil and by splitting of the mesoderm. At the complexity level, they are least complex. Accolumate are least complex. Pseudocolumate is moderately complex, and columate is most complex. For example, Planaria, Fasciola, Ascaris buscheria, earthworm, cockroaches, Pila, starfish, human. Now they might say that earthworm, cockroach, Pila, starfish, and humans are the examples of the accolumate. Okay, so you might get confused. So that is the reason. And as I mentioned, questions are all sometimes asked between the difference between accolumate, pseudocolumate, and columate with example. So you have to learn the diagram carefully, as they help in scoring the full marks. Or when I say that, especially in the BPSC, the chances of getting negative marks is significantly reduced. Okay, so these are the examples of the colmates. So a columate example would be Platyhelminthes, example Planaria thania. Pseudocolmate nematoda, example Ascaris buscheria. Colmate Annelida, earthworm, arthropoda, mollusca, echinodermata, starfish, and chordata. Now next is segmentation. So that's all for today. We will talk about the segmentation in the next lecture, and then I have some and then we will also talk about notochords and chordates, and then there is a classification table comparison chart which is also there, which will be really helpful for you guys to understand the complexities. And then I have one-liner exam facts which will be really important for you, so that even just before your exam you can go through it, and it will be really helpful for you to revise the animal kingdom. So thank you so much for seeing my lecture. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.